Hello lovely people, today we're going to be looking at some SPL drivers. It was quite a while that I wanted to do something like this, a video about SPL drivers, but I couldn't get my hands on them. So first of all, I want to thank James Dunlop from CCA, Custom Car Audio. I did purchase them because I wanted to keep them and check them out. So I always was interested how regular SQ or like normal drivers compare to SPL type drivers because I never ever had any SPL type drivers. And what we have here is the brand is called Baseface, which is brand based in the UK. They do make their drivers in China, however, the engineering and some other stuff is happening in the UK as far as I know. And James actually was working for Baseface, so he is a speaker designer, and maybe in the future, if you're interested, we might do like an episode together, just literally talking about speaker manufacturing, differences between SPL and SQ, so you would have a perspective of an actual person that works in the field rather than me. So why did I purchase these drivers? This setup, which is a bullet tweeter and a 6.5 mid-range, is a typical set that every bass head starts with. They just buy these just two-way, throw an SPL sub in the back, and just play. And I personally wanted to see how they measure, what kind of quality they are, and how do they pair, like how do you tune an SPL type system. So I will be putting these for test in my car. These tweeters, I'm just gonna mount them, I don't know how, these are gonna go in the door, and James potentially can borrow, lend me a SPL type 8-inch subwoofer, and I'm gonna try to tune it and see what happens, and maybe give some tips for our lovely bass heads how to make these sound better. So first of all, let's go through actually what we have here. Let's start with the tweeter, let's say. So tweeter comes in a box like this. What surprises me the most, like, these are extreme budget drivers. So they sell these not in pairs but in singles. So a single driver is 20 pounds, something like 20, 23, 25, depends where you find them, but like let's say 20 pounds per driver. So 40 pounds a pair, and exactly the same for the mid-range. I think they're a bit more expensive, maybe like 23, 25 pounds, but it's like 20, extreme budget, like a set of mid-ranges and tweeters. It's maybe 50 pounds, which like an American dollar, $65, which is like DS18 level, I would imagine, because those are quite cheap in America. So what surprises me the most is like the packaging. The packaging is very nice, like a thick box with loads of padding. In the box, you have included a sticker, which is like the mirror sticker, so you can put it on your window if you want to advertise that you have speakers. And they have kind of a manual sheet, and this is actually very cool. So you have a frequency response, which I don't know how it's measured, but it's a frequency response, so we can see the bad part is the scaling because it's in 10 dB increments, but it looks like these tweeters play quite nice from maybe like 4K all the way up to 20. As SPL drivers, obviously you expect massive power handling. So Baseface is notorious for, like, especially not necessarily Baseface, like Edge, Vibe in the UK that's sold, they're notorious for overstating the power ratings. So how much can you trust them? I don't really know, but it says 120 watts RMS for this specific tweeter. Well, we know that tweeters don't take much power, but yeah. The interesting part is 120 RMS at 0 THD. So no distortion for these drivers. Sensitivity is 102, which is like what you typically expect from a bullet tweet. So bullet tweets, they in general have very high sensitivity, and they have very high sensitivity because of a few factors. So one of them is the FS of the driver. We don't have an impedance plot here, but I would imagine from what they say, like frequency response 3K, I would imagine that the FS is something around 3K for this driver. And with the bullet tweets, what you have is like you have this mouth, so it acts like a horn. So basically, when you have like a dome tweeter, uh, all the sound from a dome is radiating in all directions. However, this one, what's happening is when you put a diaphragm, like the cone, inside of a like a guide, it guides the sound. So it makes basically, instead of having a light bulb that radiates in all directions, you have a flashlight, or in some cases even a laser that like concentrates the whole sound, and basically instead of spreading it out and for it being not as loud, when you concentrate it into a narrow like a beam, then you have much higher sensitivity because all that sound is going to one direction. So these, in theory, they would have very low dispersion. That means they would be very beamy, like when the driver is beaming. And I will be testing this out because I'm very interested how these bullets, like their off-axis performance, are they like literally 10 degrees only straight, or you can have some response off-axis, because like this in this graph, it shows on axis versus 45 degrees off axis, and 45 degrees off axis we can see that that's 20k, which is like maybe 6-7 dB lower, which would be very impressive. So I will be testing this because I'm very interested in it. So high sensitivity, frequency response 3 to 24k. Now, SPL drivers, obviously, they have to be crossed quite high because they don't like playing low. And the main issue that I'm think that is gonna happen is the crossover region. And like installation, which is like they give tips, which is very surprising and kind of cool. So included is a capacitor, which is this one. So it's just a single polycap. I don't know the value because it's like something J, which I don't know. So polycap that goes in series with the positive, the red one, positive lead, just like that, and it gives you a basic protection, which is a 6 dB slope. So first order crossover, like just a single cap, is 6 dB slope. If you would add a coil to this over the terminals, then you would have a second order, which you're going to be 12 dB slope. So with this, it says included capacitor 5000 hertz crossover points. So 6 dB, 5000 hertz, they base phase, the company determined that it's a safe crossover point. So we would imagine that with a 12 dB or 24 dB crossover, you could cross them a bit lower, maybe like at 3K or so, but I'll try to test the impedance of these as well, just to see how they measure. And in this, what I love is that they actually give tips. So they say, when setting up a system, ensure to listen for signs of distortion. And basically, if you hear distortion, don't drive the driver too much. But like bass heads, I don't know what they think about distortion, because distortion means loud in it. And here as well, it says, if you are an advanced user and using active crossovers, pay attention to SPL graph, la 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 la. Remember that power handling of the tweeter drops dramatically as you lower the crossover point, which is like, it's cool information that is provided with speakers, because I haven't seen any kind of this in like basic information with a speaker set, because what you get with a speaker set is just a speaker and nothing else. So these bullets, they're bloody massive, they're heavy, metal, massive ferrite magnet motor on the bottom. We can see like a metal inside, like a metal diaphragm, so probably aluminium, magnesium alloy something. And yeah, they're quite big, and I'm very interested how they're gonna perform. So this is a tweeter. Let's have a look at the mid-range. And this is a typical mid-range. Again, box comes with a sticker if you want to put it in, and it comes with a kind of manual sheet, which is kind of cool. So we have some specs here. I'm gonna try to compare them with the actual measurements when I'm gonna do them. We have a frequency response. With a frequency response, we can see that it's a mid-range. Yeah, it's not a mid-bass. And this is the thing, like, as bass heads, when they buy a 6.5 driver, they think there's a mid-bass driver, and most of them are advertised as mid-bass drivers. However, they don't really play mid-bass frequencies. They don't play much below 100 hertz, 150 hertz, because, so this is the main difference. Like, you can see the cone is like a normal cone. Dust cap is like normal. However, the surround is totally different if you compare it to a typical surround. So typical surround, you have like a bulge of rubber or something, or foam, but this one is, it's called an accordion. So some of them have a bit more ridges, some of them less. And the thing is, these drivers, they don't have a lot of X-Max. They have maybe like 3, maybe 4 millimeters of X-Max. It doesn't state the X-Max here, but I would imagine they have very low X-Max. They have very stiff suspension, extremely stiff suspension, not soft whatsoever. Like, if you compare this to SB17, you just push it lightly and it goes all over the place. And this is extremely stiff. So it has a very high FS, resonant frequency, very stiff suspension, and that's why, combined with good motor force, it's gonna have a high sensitivity. So it's gonna be able to play loud, but not low. So from the frequency response, we see exactly that. This mid-range is like below 100, starts to drop off, and it plays basically from 100 all the way to 5K, which at 5K I would imagine the cone starts to break up. And if you need to cross it according to SQ rules, like, you want these peaks, the cone breakup, to be buried in the crossover. So we would need to cross the driver about 2.5K at most, maybe even lower than that. So if you cross it at 2K, remember that this tweeter, the bullet tweeter, cannot play below 3K. So it's going to be very interesting to see how these two are going to match, because this is what people trying to match together. Yeah, 6.5 mid-range with a bullet tweet. So we will see if it's going to be a gap or not. But again, off-axis response, quite cool. 45 degrees all the way up to 4K, and after 4K they start to deviate. Now, specs for this driver, 3 ohm, 3.2, so it's kind of 4 ohm. FS 153 hertz, which is extremely high, but kind of typical for an SPL driver. A normal mid-bass driver, like SQ mid-bass drivers, are gonna have FS of about 60 to 80 hertz. Some, like Micro Precision or like some very high end, they're gonna have a lower, like down to 40 hertz, probably 45 hertz, but this is 153 hertz. So 153 hertz is a typical FS for a 3.5 inch mid-range driver that we have in SQ, but this is a 6.5, so it has much higher sensitivity. Surprising is the moving mass. So MMS or MMD is 7.5 grams and less than 7 grams. A typical 6.5 in a car audio is gonna have a moving mass more than 10 grams, 12 heavier, 15, 16 grams. So this is basically half of that. It's extremely light cone, and with light cone, because this is a paper cone, so paper light cone is good for transients. However, it's not good for producing low frequencies, and it's not gonna reproduce any low frequencies, so it's fine. Then what else we have? QTS 0.85, so extremely high QTS. And if you're gonna apply a crossover 24 dB, this, like below 150, is gonna drop off a cliff, like minus 36 dB or something is gonna be off a cliff. So basically, yeah, not good with blending with drivers, but if you want to play loud, go for it. And sensitivity, so 91.5 dB at 1 watt. And again, if you have a typical 6.5 SQ driver, that sensitivity is something below 90 dB, 89, 88, some 86, heavier ones, but like 91, 92. Some hertz drivers, like the lower end that are designed to be used with head units on low power, they will have something like 91, 92 dB sensitivity, and they will be able to play low, like down to 80 hertz or something. But this is, yeah. And the power is not as much, 80 watts only. Like for a SPL driver, it's only 80 watts, but with that 80 watts, and 91.5 dB sensitivity is going to play very, very loud. Now, again, I love these installation points and tips. Let's look at that. Ensure appropriate crossover points, which is, yeah. Be realistic about output. Do not try to turn the mid-range driver into a subwoofer. And this is exactly what people do. They buy these drivers with high FS, they put them in the doors, and they expect them to play mid-bass frequencies down to like below 100 hertz, 80, 60, 70 hertz. They are not designed to do that. These are screaming mid-ranges, 100 hertz plus. Do not try to cross them at 60 and expect them to play low. This one, ensure mounting surface is completely flat so you do not distort the speaker chassis. So we know how we've seen like bad photos of like bass head installs when they chuck the driver in the door card and like maybe have a ring or even without a ring or nothing, and they just screw it with like randomly, totally random. So poor installation in bass head installs is like a common thing. I'm not judging, I'm not saying anything, but it's just from what you see like online. So this is like just a normal tip as well. To get the best results from installation, apply deadening. Makes sense, yeah, common sense. Improve the mid-bass response. Locate all the speakers as close together as possible. So this is because again, in SPL installs, you see a lot of builds where you have multiple these mid-ranges in the door, like 4, 6, 8 mid-range drivers in the door. And it's just common sense. You try to keep them as close as possible so it have the best phase relationship between the drivers, especially at the bottom end. And again, basic tip, pay close attention to ensure you have the correct phase when installing the drivers. So like, if you have one plus minus, the other one minus plus. Yeah, it's like I love these. This is like these tips, some kind of similar tips should come with SQ drivers as well, because in some ways, again, I'm not judging, but in some ways, people that buy proper SQ drivers know nothing about install or drivers, and they try to, I don't know, but yeah, this is cool. I just love this. One thing, so cone, very light cone, paper cone. The other thing, this is a stamped steel basket, and what I noticed straight away, it is a budget driver. You cannot expect much. So what I noticed straight away, basically it rings like a bell. It's not only the initial bump, but if you leave it, you can hear like for literally maybe 1 or 2 seconds after that, you can hear the basket ringing. So this is, it's from sound quality point of view, it's an extremely bad thing, and that's why for like SQ drivers you have cast aluminum or some kind of plastics. So plastics are not bad because plastics don't really resonate as much, but this like stamped steel is extremely resonating at high frequencies. Yeah. So again, for SQ purposes, it would be very bad. But like for SPL, when you're driving this, I don't know how much, 110, 120 dB loudness, it doesn't really matter. But again, it will be very interesting to see how it's gonna perform. So quite a chunky magnet motor in the back, not not as big as some. So for example, SB17 acoustics, it has a much bigger motor than this, like a thicker and heavier, and that one is rated only at 60 watts RMS, and this one is rated at 80. So yeah, just initial overview of these drivers. Again, when I will have time, I will put them in the car and test them. And what I want to say is huge thank you for people that supported me via PayPal and Patreon, because this purchase was made from the donations. And because I wanted to buy these for a long time, I just didn't want to spend like my money, my own, that's like for food and stuff. But now, since I have some spare money, thank you very much for supporting me. If you like the content that I'm creating, if you appreciate it, and if you would want to see something similar in the future for me testing like different stuff, you can support me via PayPal or on Patreon. You can find me on Patreon, so it's up to you. You don't have to do it, but if you do that, I'm gonna buy more stuff and I'm gonna test more stuff. So yeah, I think I'm gonna end this here. This was like a short introduction of my extremely budget SPL type drivers, and we will see how they're gonna measure. Yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.